What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Pazza podcast. We are back this week on the back of two back-to-back victories for Inter. Midweek, traveling to Dortmund, which I guess after this introduction, we can debate on whether or not it's a big game or not, Vince. But travels to Dortmund against the Yellow Wall there in Germany and comes away with a 2-0 victory. Goals from DiMarco and Andy Doof, Special Officer Doofy, reporting for duty that match. Then we follow up that 2-0 victory with another 2-0 victory today against Cremonese, a match that Inter in the first half dominated and looked like, the Inter that dominates all of Serie A boneheaded move by some Inter fans to start the second half that really kind of killed the game and any momentum really the game had at all. After that moment, which we will talk about a little bit, the game kind of stalled in the second half and Inter comes away ultimately with I wouldn't say rather easy victory away at Cremonese because they did hit the post, but again, it's all 3 points away from the San Siro. So, we build that lead, which is 9 points against Napoli now. And then Milan, we're up 8 points, but they have a game in hand. We are joined again this week, and it's probably going to become just a regular thing. We don't have to make a guest introduction anymore for Vince. Vince, you got to watch the midweek match more than I did. I was at work and had to kind of just listen to it. But before we dive into this Cremonese match, give us some quick thoughts on what you thought about the performance midweek against Dortmund, and if you think that that is a big game victory for Kivu.
I'd call it a big game victory. Dortmund certainly has European pedigree. I mean, they were a Champions League finalist the year between the years that we went most recently. They're second in the Bundesliga. I know Bayern usually runs Germany, but they're a solid team. They had their chances in the game, especially early. I know as the game went on, we started to take over a little bit, culminating in the two late goals that we had. But all in all, I didn't feel it was our best showing for most of the game until we started to crack things open late when we started to push, when we were like, okay, there is a chance for top eight here. Let's keep throwing everything at them, see if we can come up with something. And to the credit of the guys, they did what they had to. It was a couple other results that went our way and that sank our any chance of us making the top eight, unfortunately. But 10th isn't too bad. We made it through to the knockouts, so we're looking ahead to Bodo Glimt here. It could be a possible trap game. We'll see. But all in all, I was pretty happy with the Dortmund game, how it ended, and I think it was a pretty good morale boost for the guys. I think beating a team like Dortmund is gonna do a lot of good things for the locker room mentality.
Yeah, agreed. And from just listening to it and catching bits and pieces of the match, for me, it kind of felt like a performance that we've seen Inter in the past 12 to 18 months not get a victory or get 3 points from. The first half was very slow. Any attack we had kind of stalled out. It was kind of a frustrating first half from what I gathered listening to it. And usually when that happens, it just feels like the whole game kind of finishes that way. And Inter never really gets from out of third gear to fourth or fifth gear. And it is a good sign that the guys grinded it out, on the back of a DiMarco brilliant set piece goal, brilliant free kick, and then Andy Doof just pretty much killing the game off in the 90th minute. Like that was a good response. I really enjoyed hearing and seeing that from the guys. And then, like you mentioned, the results didn't go our way. Napoli side under Conte that pisses away a 2-1 lead against Chelsea and ends up losing, which ultimately, you can't really pinpoint that as the reason why we didn't finish top eight. You have, the last second goal against Atletico that we let in, poor defending on a set piece, the phantom penalty that was given against Liverpool in the 89th minute. If we get away from both of those games with 1 point each, we're in the top eight. So a lot going on there. Like you said, 10th isn't a bad way to finish. And, so a lot of times we've seen whenever we have a hard midweek match, the guys struggle to respond on the weekend against a league opponent. And you see it right now with Napoli, especially, maybe not this weekend, but in the past few weeks, anytime they've had to play a midweek match, they dropped points at the weekend. So, what was going to be the response for this Inter team against Cremonese after this? What was going to be a huge um, kind of obstacle, I guess, for them to face. And we started this match with a lineup of Jan Sommer. I know, trust me, I know everybody wanted to see a different keeper in there. And maybe we'll get to see it midweek. Who knows? But Jan Sommer was given the chance to start again this match. The back line of Jan Bisek, Manuel Akanji, Alessandro Bastoni, Luis Aniki, rumors that he was going to be or is going to be leaving to the Premier League. Davide Fratesi, rumors that he's going to be leaving for the Premier League. Both get the start. Zielinski makes that start back in that regista role with Çalhanoğlu. Should be coming back from injury in the next couple weeks. Petar Sucic and Federico Di Marco make the rest of that five there. And then Lautaro and Pio, which we talked about last time you were on, Vince. Is Pio going to be the starter with Lautaro? And if you take some context clues here, maybe that's the case. Maybe that's what Kivu is looking at. But with that lineup, Vince, I know the obvious Jan Zomer and Pep Martinez. Was there anything else that you wanted to see or were surprised at based off that starting lineup when it dropped?
No, it all made sense to me. I know, unfortunately, we're dealing with a bit of a run of injuries here right now. We don't have Çalhanoğlu, we don't have Barella, we don't have Dumfries, and then it was announced a little later in the week that we weren't going to have Carlos for today. So our options are kind of limited as far as the back line. I like those three guys together. Bastoni, who I do feel like had a bit of a better game today and has been doing a little better lately than the that run of games December into the beginning of the year we had talked about. I feel like he's starting to turn it around a little, which is good to see. I like Akanji in the middle. I like Bisek on the right. I knew Bisek did have some struggles today, but looking at who else we could have put in, considering how high of a line we use on defense and how Cremonese liked to just try and keep playing those long balls over the top, I did feel like putting in a Cherby would have been a mistake because I thought he was going to get burned. So maybe we could have put DeVry in there. I don't know. So overall, pretty happy with the choices in defense and how they did today for the most part. Midfield, we were kind of stuck with what we had. It was play those guys or Mkhitaryan basically, and he came on later anyway. And the attackers, yeah, that configuration, Lautaro and Pio Esposito is working right now. And of course, the only other thing was I wanted to see Josep Martinez. And if he doesn't play the Copa game midweek, I honestly don't know what we're doing anymore.
Yeah. I don't know what he's got to do to get minutes. It seems like a wasted 15 million for a club that can't afford to waste 15 million. The fact that we're not even giving a chance to somebody at this point in matches against Cremonese or we'll see what the lineup comes out against midweek against Torino in the Copa. But yeah, what was the point of spending that 15? We could have put it elsewhere in the squad or something. But you had mentioned the back line, and I agree with you starting out. It was a smart decision with Kivu starting with that Bisek, Akanji, Bastoni back line. That's a back line that, probably is our most pacey back line that we have. And when you look at the forwards that Cremonese were starting with, Bonazzoli and Vardy, you're right. Maybe a Cherby would have not been, he would have been getting caught out more often than not than an Akanji and Bisek due to his lack of pace. So I do think from the start, Kivu got that right. The one thing that kind of, for me, and again, it's injuries and everything too adding up, but Fratesi starting, especially against a squad that we know under Davide and Nicola is going to be tough to break down. And that's just not the type of player Fratesi is. He's a more direct, find him over the top kind of midfielder, not the type of midfielder that's going to give that splitting pass or add a little bit of creativity to break down a low block. So that was the one that kind of surprised me a little bit. But going into the first half, I think Inter had an absolutely brilliant first half for the most part. There was maybe one or two blemishes that luckily, Jan Sommer came off his line once and had a decent save as well and kind of saved us there. But before we even get to that, it was just there seemed to be the passing buzzing around really well. Zielinski was being that metronome in the midfield, like he's been all season. He's been arguably the best player on the squad. You know, you can argue DiMarco, Lautaro, or Zielinski. I think those are the pretty much the three that everyone and their mothers agree have been the best Inter players this season. And we didn't have to wait long before the chances come. In the 13th minute, Lautaro had a strike. I don't know if you remember this one, Vince, but it was like from 30 yards out. Kind of took me for surprise. I didn't think Lautaro would do something like that, but brilliant strike. And it was a lot closer than it looked on live time. That's
I
for
thought it was
sure.
going in live.
Yeah.
I thought he nailed it. I was like, oh
Yeah.
no.
And even Aldero, I mean, he jumped like it was, almost there. It was a brilliant strike. And then he didn't have to wait long to actually get the goal. It came 2 minutes later in the 15th minute from another set piece, corner, kick goal off the header, which Lautaro's been kind of on a run of headed goals, it seems like lately. Vince, what's your make on this Lautaro run of form and this goal in particular?
He's great. I mean, like you said, I it feels like we keep seeing this set piece or crossing over the top action to him where he gets a header and he scores. It almost feels like right now he's better with his head than his feet.
Seriously.
And again, for a player as short as he is, you wouldn't expect him to be so good in the air, but by God, he does it. I don't know how, but
Yeah.
I feel like he's in great form right now. What's he up to? Like 13, 14 goals or something?
13 in the league, and then I think four in the Champions League. So he's on 17 goals this season.
He's doing pretty well. So
Yeah.
obviously he's got a pretty strong case right now for Capo Cannoniere, which would be nice to see him win that again. Um, so he's our captain. You love to see him succeed. We know he's a streaky player, and we did see it sometimes. I think earlier this season, I forget if it was exactly at the start or there was like right after the start, he had that dip. But once he spins up, he's the guy you want leading the line.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if you remember, there was a moment, I believe it was kind of midway to late in the second half, off of a set piece. It kind of bounced around, and then Cremonese put another ball in. And who was the last player in defense that clears the ball out? It's Lautaro Martinez. Like he does everything on the pitch. And that's again, we don't need to beat the dead horse, but it always makes me laugh when people try and compare Pulisic or McTominay or all these other players that are in that conversation, you could maybe say, as who's the best in Serie A. I don't think anybody, you could even argue on the planet, gives what Lautaro gives to Inter. And, maybe teams, these big teams, when we struggle and, people hate on Lautaro for our big game struggles because he doesn't show up in that. But maybe these teams over Europe, they realize and recognize that Lautaro is the player that they need to zone in and make sure he does not kill them because he is that type of player. And in Serie A, it's more of a team structure. How can we stop the entire team? Very tactical. Whereas the rest of Europe, maybe it's like, hey, if we eliminate Lautaro from the squad and not let him do anything, who else is going to kill us for Inter? The only other player I think you could argue is the guy that assisted him on this and a guy who's maybe on an even better run of form, Federico Di Marco. Vince, I know this is one of your favorite guys, but he's on a run of form of like 3 goals in the past 4 matches and like 4 assists, something alien numbers that he's putting up right now. Vince, is there a better left back in the world than Federico Di Marco at the moment?
I don't think so at the moment. The only one you could really put over him, probably in my opinion, anyways, Nuno Mendes, which I believe he's out injured right now anyway. So setting him aside, yeah, Dima's that guy right now. And we know even last year when he was healthy, he was probably one of our best players for the first half of the season. He had a great season the year before too. Born and bred Interista. He's again, I thought he put in a pretty good showing in the Champions League game against Dortmund. He had the armband there. I feel like he was. I feel like he put on a good He did right by it. We'll say that. So yeah, he's another guy that, like you said, I think he gives it all, and it's really great to see him clicking right now.
Yeah, it really is. And it comes at a time, him and Lautaro hitting form at a time that we needed it most. We talked a few weeks ago about how this January and now even moving into this February, you can say how important these 2 months will be for Inter deciding on how the rest of the season goes. And the two guys, the Interisti, born and bred Di Marco, and then Lautaro, who has become an Interisti through 6, 7, 8 years, seasons of being with the squad and knowing what it takes to win with this club. These are the guys that are coming up huge for us in these moments, and it's great to see. And these are the guys we need this run of form to continue. If we can get also Bastoni, Barella, these guys finding their form as well, it's I think it's a done deal for the league pretty much. And there's no one else that can compete with us. But getting back to the game after the goal, Cremonese comes down on a corner kick and threatens us. It was a volley after a couple bounces in the box. Ceccarini hit the volley and it missed just wide. But again, set pieces. This is a theme. It's again, it sounds like it's a beating a dead horse for Inter. It's we start matches hot and can't score, and then we give up goals late, and it's set pieces most of the time. That's the most dangerous thing against us. So at this point of the season, I don't know what Kivu can do. It seems like that's just going to be our kryptonite. Vince, do you think anything is going to change as far as set pieces for this squad?
This deep in the season, it's really hard to see that changing. It's going to be set pieces for us, defending them the rest of the season, at least, where it's going to be a moment of tension. The counter to that is that we are very good at taking them ourselves. So it's a I know everyone likes to talk about how Arsenal is so dependent on set pieces. I think it's a little funny that our game didn't devolve into just corner goals back and forth,
That would have
because
been
something like
something.
that wouldn't have surprised me.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think we're gonna have to take some good with the bad here a little bit, and hopefully we can start working some of those bugs out with another off season. Although with the World Cup coming, who knows? But yeah, I think we're kind of stuck with what we got as far as that goes right now, unfortunately. And changing it back is we're too deep in sunk cost at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just something that we got to hope, you know, the fouls are close to goal. We got to limit those at all cost because that's another set piece opportunity. Corners happen in the run of play, so there's really nothing you can strategize off of that. But yeah, I think it's just inevitably going to be every match. Corner is something we got to be clinching during because who knows how it's going to go. Unfortunately, luckily though, we didn't have to wait again too much longer after that chance from Cremonese for our second goal and final goal, and it was maybe the golazzo of the year. I would say you could make a case that Zielinski now has one and two as far as golazzos for Inter this season. Vince, which one do you think's better, that one or the volley off the corner that Çalhanoğlu assisted against Verona?
I gotta give it to the volley off the corner. Just it was not just his strike on the ball; it was Çalhanoğlu's delivery that also make it so beautiful for me. It's two components that both guys got perfectly right, and it was just cinema.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with you, but this one, if you that angle where it's behind Zielinski and you just see the swerve on the ball, originally the commentators were like, Alduro's definitely should have done better than that. And then the more they watched it, you could hear the Italian who had played defense for I think Inter in the early '90s. I forget what his name is. The more he watched it, you could hear him be like, I don't know, the with the swerve and everything. Like Aldero is lucky that it didn't hit him in the face after. It was just the speed, the dip, the swerve, the knuckle. There's only a handful of goalkeepers maybe in the world that could have done anything with that. I think whenever you're a keeper on that one, you got to at least try and get some sort of palm on it and hope that you redirect it out. I really don't think there's much you can do other than that. Like The swerve on that was just absolutely insane. And it's Zielinski again. Not going to beat the dead horse again on him. He's just him. You can include with DiMarco and Lautaro, maybe that's got that run of form that is just out of this world right now. And Lautaro, DiMarco involved in the first goal, and then Zielinski with the wonder strike on the second goal. It's those three guys that have kind of been propelling us these last few months are the ones that ultimately win the match for us. There was in the first half after the goal, maybe a couple worrisome moments, and this is where I kind of want to get to where my first half thoughts kind of started. Bisek, we talked about it with the lineups and how it was important to have him and Akanji in there to deal with the speed. But Bisek, he's one of those players, like he does good. In the 10th minute, he had an absolute great. Vardy had gotten past Akanji, and Bisek caught up to him and snuffed out the danger. But then after that, there was a moment where it was a clearance from Cremonese, and Bisek finds himself way high up the pitch, and he doesn't hit the header to clear the ball out. He lets it bounce, which exposes us. Vardy gets through, and luckily he had a missed time. Or no, that was the one Jan Sommer came off the line and did really well with. But Bisek, you got to win the first ball there. And then in the 44th minute, right before the end of the half, Bisek again gave the ball carelessly away near our box, and Bonazzoli tried to do his best Zielinski impression with his left foot. Luckily, Jan Sommer was able to actually get a palm behind it, because if it would have been anywhere else, who knows where that ball would have gone. But Bisek, it's becoming, his athleticism and his effort and his stuff he does moving forward is reminiscent of a player who has the ability to be class. But then these boneheaded moments and stuff like what we saw in the first half specifically, I think he shorted up in the second half a little bit, but in the first half specifically, do you have much faith with Bisek moving forward, not even towards the end of the season, but in the future as a Nerazzurri? Or do you think that's, again, we're going to have to be looking at another center back position to maybe in the summer, since we're probably not going to make a move this mercato? Are we going to be looking for maybe a Bisek replacement, or what do you make of Bisek, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
He's a very good player, but he's not a great player. I know we see this athleticism, this pace, his height, physicality, everything. It's all great to have. He's definitely a good right center back. Um, Looking at everyone else we have on the roster, he's the one I want there. And this is where looking at the roster, this is where we kind of have to be a bit pragmatic about things. The fact is, we're going to be losing about probably at least three defenders this offseason. Probably Acerbi's going to be gone, De Vrij's going to be gone, Darmian's probably going to be gone. Those three guys at least. Thiago Tomas Palacios already went out the door. He wasn't the guy. So already we're looking at replacing three defenders, and that's in addition to whoever else we're going to be replacing in the midfield. We're losing Mkhitaryan. There's noise every offseason now if Çalhanoğlu's going to do a victory lap in Turkey. Barella's kind of been getting buy-in name only lately. Zielinski's the wrong side of 30. Just looking at where we have roster needs, you look at everything that Jan Bisek does bring to the table, in addition to his youth, it's pretty clear he's going to be the guy, and we're going to have to take the bad with the good. Now, when it's bad, yeah, I know there are probably I can think of at least three games where he gives away a handball penalty, including the one in Lazio last year, which I felt that one was really bad, where he had his arms behind his back and he still managed to jump in the way of a shot that wasn't even going to be a problem. But again, this, compared to the alternatives, yeah, I feel like when we had Pavard, he was already taking over for Pavard pretty well. I do think he probably should have started the Champions League final anyway, considering Pavard had been out injured for so long. Do I trust him to be that middle guy in the defense? No, not really. I'd like somebody who has a bit more, maybe wisdom, somebody like Acerbi, having been around long enough. And I do feel like Akanji is a little smarter and works in the middle while still offering some pace at the position. So all in all, I think we're good where we are with Jan Bisek.
Yeah. I think if we were going to move on from him, we should have done it this past summer. I think now maybe it's a little too late, especially with Pavard seemingly not going to be able to make his way back into the squad after he comes back from loan. He just seems completely checked out pretty much as a footballer, a professional footballer. And yeah, with how much need we're going to have this summer, the less amount of need at different positions than what you already mentioned, the better. So I agree. I think Bisek is going to be one that's going to be staying with us, and it's something he's really got to work on this summer. His mental aspect of the game, staying switched on for 90 minutes. That really is what separates a lot of good footballers from great footballers, is that mental aspect and staying switched on for 90 minutes. The last pretty much point I have before the second half that I wrote down is that we know Cremonese in the second half now, they're going to be chasing a goal. They're going to press a little higher. So we need to take advantage of the openings that we're going to find in spaces in behind in the midfield and find a third goal to kill this off. And then the second half starts, and 49th minute, absolutely despicable moment that occurs from our fans. A flare was thrown on the field. I still can't 100% confirm if it hit Aldero or not. Anyway, regardless, it was so close, and it exploded pretty much right at him. And it's just despicable. We're not going to talk long about this, but whoever the fan was needs to be banned for life, especially throwing it at Adero, who is a player for Inter that played on the Seconda Stella squad. This is a guy that is, when he did step in for a couple matches that I remember correctly, maybe even in the Copa that season, he played good for Inter, and the fact that we have idiots out there that think it's funny or smart to throw a flare is just idiotic, and we don't need to give them any more, airwave on this podcast or any podcast. Anybody just needs to mention how stupid it is and let it go. So yeah, there's that, and then to get on a better note, like I'd said earlier about Lautaro, it was the 54th minute where he was the last man back to clear the ball after a series of attacks from Cremonese. Just an absolute captain performance today. His turns in the midfield were incredible. Again, I think Kivu has started telling Lautaro, and I think why it works best with him with Pio too is, I don't know if you noticed this again today, Vince. We mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, but Lautaro a lot of times now is finding the ball almost as like a trequartista in the midfield, like in that gap in between where our midfield setup and Pio is where Lautaro is doing a lot of his damage, and he's turning defenders, forcing center backs to play higher up on the pitch to find him, and that's leaving a lot of room for Pio and then our wing backs, namely DiMarco. Luis Enrique doesn't get high enough, it seems like, but have you noticed that, or is that just me being crazy, Vince? This Lautaro dropping deeper, playing in like an old school number 10 kind of role.
Oh, he's definitely been playing deeper, and I think we saw a lot of that even last season. And I think that may have had something to do with his, at least in the league, his diminished goal output. He did pretty good in Champions League, and he was slumping a fair bit as I guess it was probably the November into December. But yeah, you can definitely see that he's not just a pure number 9 goal scorer now. He's definitely adding to his game with the getting the ball a little deeper, pressing as much as he does, coming back. The guy's work rate is just incredible. Um, and now we're seeing he's got, okay, maybe he's taken some of what he picked up last season from playing a little deeper, but now he's getting the goals to go with it. So I feel like it feels like he's having a really special season, all things considered.
I agree. The only thing missing is, I think, for him, for fans to truly back him this season, for whatever reason, there's fans out there that haven't. He needs a goal against Milan or Juve. One of these two derbies to end the season. I think Lautaro needs to have a goal off of it to really, get the fan base 100% back on his side, because there is people that I hear on different podcasts and different message boards that lament the fact that he doesn't score in big games, and rightfully so. I mean, that's a fair argument to make, but what he does for Inter and what he represents for the club. There's no drama, not like, Icardi drama or anything like that, or Lukaku off the field stuff. It's this guy seemingly has his life together. He loves Inter, and what more can you ask for from an Inter fan? So that's all we're gonna say about Lautaro. I feel like I'm blushing right now because I just absolutely love Lautaro. He's unbelievable. We'll get to the subs now. So we made the subs. Mkhitaryan comes on for Fratesi in the 60th minute, which I know, Vince, he's your boy. But again, was there anything that you saw in this match Fratesi did that stood out?
So Davide Fratesi, I've always been in the camp that he's not really a starter here, at least not in the system we currently use. Maybe if we deployed a different formation, he could find a bit more of a regular role, but his thing has always been he's a clutch super sub who scores goals. Um, and the reason I guess he's my boy is because it feels like there's, in many cases, we've talked time and time again about how so many of our players aren't clinical in front of goal. And then we have this guy who somehow, some way can get the ball on target and score these goals in these late game or big game situations. I know everybody is kind of ready to show him the door, but it's something like that that makes me say, well, hold on, let's see if we can, if we're going to send him away, then we got to get something for him because I'm very hesitant to throw away somebody who can actually find the net when we need it. So that said, he's not really a starter in the system we use right now, and I don't think he had a particularly great game today. I think considering all the injuries, yeah, giving him a start was probably necessary, especially because we've seen Mkhitaryan grow into this role of a something like a closer in midfield, somebody who can come in and be a dependable, seasoned guy who has enough legs for 20 to 30 minutes just to make sure, that everything stays on script, everything goes to plan, that we can lock up shop. And I do think we saw that a little bit today. There was that one sequence late where I think it was Zerbin hit the post against us, and it devolved into there was this scramble in the box where it was all three guys in our back line: Bastoni, Akanji, Bisek, and then Mkhitaryan. The four of them were just getting block after block after block, and somebody somebody with his defensive work rate, with his knowledge of the game, I think that's the kind of situation where Mkhitaryan shines. So I do think it was a good sub bringing Mkhitaryan in this case. But yeah, it's the Davide Fratesi experiment is it's pretty much over. I hate to say it, but you can just see pretty much every time the guy starts, with rare exception, you can tell he's not it.
Yeah. I need his agent to be my professional agent because every mercato he's getting linked with Nottingham Forest, Newcastle, Galatasaray, and it's like nothing ever comes from it. But somehow he's getting linked to these clubs of some stature. I mean, Nottingham Forest, Newcastle, those are maybe not in the current state of English Premier League big clubs, but those are sides with tradition who over the years you maybe could have considered a big club. And then Galatasaray is their bigger club in Turkey right now. Maybe Fenerbahce, Besiktas, whoever you want to talk about. But Galatasaray seems to be year in and year out the one Turkish side that is going deeper into the Champions League. And so it's like, what has Fratesi done to warrant these links? Like I said, I need his agent to be my professional agent, and maybe I
And
can get a job for like Goldman Sachs or something like that. Who knows?
well, the answer I have, and we have this in the group chat. What has he done to warrant it? The Billy Bean Moneyball. He gets on base. He scores clutch goals. Bayern, Barcelona. He keeps doing it.
Yeah,
He hasn't done it
that's
really this year,
8 months
though.
ago.
I'm sorry,
He,
they're big games. They're big games, and he's there.
yeah, that is something. I mean, we can't forget that about Fratesi for sure. But the other subs we made, Turam comes on for Pio. Darmian finally back. Comes on for Luis Enrique. Seeing him, Darmian, it's kind of like It's like that kid that whenever he goes and spends the night with like his friends, he has to have his like blanket from home to be able to sleep. That's how I view Darmian. He's like our little safety blanket. Whenever he's in the squad and like even on the pitch, I just feel so much more secure. It's not like he offers anything crazy. He pops up with an occasional goal here or there. But for whatever reason, and I might be just crazy, Vince, you can say if you feel the same way. Having him in the squad at least just gives me comfort.
Yeah, it was good to see him again. I know 2 years back, time's blending together. In the last Scudetto run, he had kind of, partially due to the Dumfries injury, he had kind of taken over that right wing back position, and by the end of the year, he was the go-to guy for the position. So there's a certain bit of familiarity that we have with him that does make him, it does give us a sense of assurance. Um, that's it. Obviously, coming forward, he doesn't have the speed of some of his counterparts, or even that he used to, but we know he can put in a good shift when he's healthy, and he really hasn't been healthy in a while. So, like I said, it was good to have him back.
For sure. And then to kind of sum up the end of this match, Boni comes on for Lautaro, Andy Doof comes on for Petr Sucic. And for me, the sub that I don't understand why Kivu didn't make is whenever Cremonese, Davide Nicola put on Milan Juric, we know everybody knows what they're gonna do at this point. Juric is like 6'6". He's a beast. He's one of those old school Serbian, kind of like Mitrovic, used to play for Fulham. Big guy, and he's like a Mortal Kombat villain. Like he just has that era and look. So I would have wanted to see, and again, this is hindsight, knowing how the match ended up going, but having a Cherby in there to battle with him, Akanji, he's not bad aerially battling with players, but you could close out the match, and they had a couple chances. They hit it, like you'd mentioned, off the post from Zerbin, which came from kind of a set piece where the ball got whipped in and then it bounced around a little bit. It found Zerbin, who hit it. They had another dangerous ball. Petzela sends it in, and it was like in that gray area in between Juric and Zerbin. I think Bastoni and Di Marco did a really good job kind of ushering those players with their body away from where the ball was landing. But it's for me, that seemed like an obvious sub that Kivu should have seen and should have made, is bringing on a Cherby to finish the match out, battling against Juric. Luckily, it didn't bite us in the ass, and we ended up winning 2-0. But for me, that was the only thing really that stood out for me in the match that Kivu maybe got wrong. Vince, is there any other thing, and do you echo that sentiment? Is there anything you see that Kivu maybe could have done differently other than that?
Well, I think once the lead was secure and we were able to sit back a little more, I think Acerbi might have been a decent sub to make in the middle. Yeah, somebody, again, similar to Mkhitaryan, somebody who's old, wise, knows the game, can come in late to do what they're good at and close things out. Um, I understand keeping the forwards the fresh, so I understand the subs there. Gotta say, Taram still not impressing me. Um, might have tried to give Pio some more action, but I imagine that he's probably going to get some time in the Copa game later this week. So rotation's a must, and thankfully we have the guys that we can do it now. Doof, yeah, considering how thin the midfield is, he was probably going to need to get some minutes. He was fine. I did think Sucic had a solid game. You could tell he's hungry. He's trying to prove himself. So uh, he did solid. I felt like Doof was a bit of a step down, but a necessary one today. Um, so yeah, all in all, I no real complaints about the subs considering how limited we are right now. And looking at the schedule, it's good that these injuries are happening now in this run of games where we have the Leches, the Cremoneses before we get into uh, Champions League knockout play or the Juventus game, Milan Derby. If this is going to happen, it's good that it's happening now, and it's good that we're still grinding these games out, getting these 3 points against these teams that on paper should be gimmies.
Yeah, agreed. I really like your point with Sucic there too. I think he's somebody I forgot to mention. He had a solid game, especially early in the first half. Maybe he faded a little bit in the second half, but just his touches and his movement off the ball. He's only 21, 22. Same with Pio. And I think you can say his performance was similar to Sucic. They started hungry and they're out there really, you know, fighting for everything and their movement looks good and whatnot. And then they kind of maybe slowed down a little bit as the game wore on in the second half. But it's encouraging to see these young guys get moments and minutes in a match that you can maybe argue this isn't a big match. Definitely isn't compared to, you know, the Milans, the Juves, the Dortmunds, but it's still 3 points up for grabs in a Serie A league that is still not over, despite us opening up a little bit of a gap. It's still important matches week in and week out. So it's good that these players, Sucic, Pio, are showing up, and I wouldn't say being world beaters, but also not beating Inter as well. How many players and performances during the banter era do we have players that seemingly were playing against Inter on our side? You can even argue, Taremi, Correa, some of their performances. We'd rather play with 10 men than have 11 men and them on the pitch sometimes, kind of. So that is a big thing. And then I guess the last player we haven't mentioned, and I'll let you give your thoughts before we move on to the full time. Bastoni. What did you think of Bastoni's performance today, Vince?
I think he's quietly improving. I know we had talked about how he had a run of games late last year into the start of this year where you could tell something was off, and we had been talking about, all right, is it time to panic? Do we give Carlos more minutes? But I think he's quietly starting to turn it around. I do think he, maybe just needed a little bit of rest. He got some, and you can start to see some of the old Bastoni again. So something to keep watching, but I'm seeing some good signs that he's waking up and getting back to his old self.
Agreed, agreed. It was one of those like solid. He had some great balls into the box a couple times. I don't know, think he got an assist today, but one for Turam in particular, right after Turam came on, that just barely missed wide was a brilliant ball from Bastoni. And right, yeah, he looks like he's getting a little more aggressive too. So hopefully that'll continue through the rest of the season. Vince, who's your man of the match?
It's got to be Lautaro today.
Yeah, I agree. I put Zielinski or DiMarco with a question mark after that too. I think Zielinski was great in the midfield. Did a lot of. He was even playing Hakan like style over the top passes today, which we haven't seen much when he plays in that regista position. And then DiMarco was just DiMarco, but there were some moments where Lautaro would trap the ball, feint one way, turn the defender the other way, and just create so much open space for that left side of the pitch, whether it's Bastoni or DiMarco. It was just absolutely beautiful. And then he capped it with a brilliant goal. The defensive work. This has got to be, I think, between him and DiMarco, they've won, and mainly it's been Lautaro. They've won like the last 7 man of the matches for Inter from Serie A. They're both on an incredible run of form. Um,
Then plus Pio.
yeah, Pio as well. He got the one. Was that Pisa? Was I think Pio? No, I think DiMarco. He came on and subbed in.
I think
But
it might
yeah,
have been Lecce.
maybe it was Lecce. Yeah. So yeah, we're going through a really good purple patch of form with some players, and it comes at a great time. Like you said earlier, we face Torino Wednesday in the Coppa Italia, and then Sassuolo away at the Mappe before we have Juve. So we got really about 2 weeks to get healthy before Juve. And then Napoli, if you want to look at who our closest competitors are, they have Genoa next after they had beaten Fiorentina yesterday 2-1. But then they have Como in the Coppa Italia, Roma, and Atalanta. So they go Como, Roma, Atalanta. Roma and Atalanta being league fixtures. So maybe with some help from Roma, Atalanta, we could maybe get a little bit more of a gap on Napoli if we continue winning. And then Milan, they have Bologna Tuesday away. It's a big match. Could potentially keep us 8 or 6, 5 points, however many away from Milan. But then they have Pisa and Como after that. So an important run of games for Inter and the competitors coming up, and we'll really, I think, by end of February, kind of know whether or not we're going to have this league seemingly wrapped up or not moving into March. Who knows? I think there's a good chance that if we keep the form we're going, Milan and Napoli will drop a couple more points, and we could go into March, potentially being 9, 10 points ahead of second place. And that would be big. It would be offer us an opportunity to rest some players, maybe on league matches, where if we're still in the Champions League, we can focus a little more on that and not worry about if we're going to drop points or so. Who knows? It seems like the team is more focused on the league this year than the Champions League. Vince, before we wrap this up, I'm going to let you start on the last thing that I want us to talk about, and that is this mercato or lack of mercato. If you wouldn't mind just giving some thoughts on what this has been this January.
It's all been much ado about nothing, which is disappointing. I don't think anyone realistic out there was expecting any earth-shattering transfer news. That generally doesn't happen with us in January. But to see all the names thrown around and to have none of them happen, it all just feels really anticlimactic. We're stuck with the guys we've got, and not that that's a bad thing. There are a couple players that I do think, at the end of the season, it's time to send them on their way. But it would have been nice to bring in some reinforcements, especially with the on the right side with the quality drop off when Luis Enrique's on the field and not having Dumfries and maybe he's looking at the door. It would have been nice to bring in somebody on the right, but between that and all the injuries we have right now, I hoped we'd get something, but no, it doesn't look like it. It looks like we're probably going to have to wait until summer, which hopefully when summer rolls around, it's going to be a little more uh hopefully our market will be a little more active, or not active. I'd say we were active. We just weren't finishing anything out. We weren't finishing any moves. Um, Conclusive. That's the word. We need to get. I think we need to make some conclusive moves in the summer to refresh the team. I mean, we're looking how many. I remember in the Dortmund game, I think the commentary had mentioned at some point that we had something like 37-year-olds in the starting lineup, which we can't keep doing it. We've got a couple old defenders that need to go. The midfield's getting really old. I know we were talking about this the other day, and I was throwing out the possibility of maybe are any of the under 23 guys ready? Can we bring Stankovic back? Is Topolovic or Berenbrook an option? Um, but yeah, sooner or later, we're not going to be able to just keep kicking the can down the road. We're going to need to refresh the squad at some point. I feel like we got away with it a little bit this past summer, and we're kind of getting away with it a little bit now in January. Sooner or later, that bill is going to come due. So I understand why the fans are disappointed. I am too. But yeah, I think it's pretty warranted disappointment because something is going to need to happen sooner rather than later if we want the team to stay competitive.
Yeah, I agree. The thing that pisses me off the most is last January, we're in a similar spot. I think we're maybe a point off, or maybe we might have even been in the lead of Serie A at this point. Coming off the back of Supercopa, where Hakan gets hurt, and the need to bring in just somebody in the midfield. We had seen Mkhitaryan slowly lulling back and regressing as a player. Zielinski hadn't gotten the run of games, didn't seemingly have the trust of Inzaghi. There was other positions, striker, we hadn't really gotten any involvement from Taremi, Correa, Arnautovic, these other guys. And the fact that we fell short last season from any title, it's one of those, it's like fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. How incompetent can this management be and not see, even if it is bringing someone like a Perisic on a 6-month dry loan, or a Meunier, the Belgium right wing back, Hans Hateboer used to play for Atalanta, another right wing back that's in the French league, somebody with experience for 6 months to come in and lift the squad, bring that championship mentality, bring a different, hunger, because we've seen these guys that have been playing with each other for 5, 6 years now. Ultimately, it's just human nature. You're going to lose a bit of that hunger. And for management to just piss on us fans and not bring in anybody, if we fall short again this season, it'll be a monumental collapse, being right now 8 points ahead of Milan. Granted, they have the game in hand and 9 points ahead of Napoli. Like that would be a typical Inter collapse there. And it's just there's no one to blame other than management at that point because Kivu has done his job. Look at all the injuries that are piling up. The players are I mean, DiMarco is playing a full 90, which never happened last season. He's playing a full 90 week in and week out, sometimes multiple times a week. Luis Enrique, how many games has he started in a row? Lautaro is playing a shit ton of games. Bastoni, Kanji, at some point, what if one or two of those guys go down too? Bringing in somebody, one or two players. There was a time in 2006, 2007 era, we had Vieira, Dacour, Cambiaso, Zanetti, these midfielders, but management still brought in Maniche on a 6 month loan from Portugal. And he came in and had an impact, and we ended up winning the Scudetto that year. Like, even if it's only he plays 4 or 5 games, somebody with some quality, not a Felipe Caicedo. We don't want to see a player like that anymore. Somebody that could just lift the rest of the squad for 4 or 5 matches. Perisic, we only need you until March, mid March, because Dumfries is ahead of schedule, but it's going to take some time for him to get match fitness. We only need you till then. Like somebody, and just the ineptitude and the lack of, I don't want to say caring, because I know Marotta, Zanetti, I know Auxilio, these guys care, but it's like a spit in the face of us fans when we get linked to a Diaby, a Perisic, a Cancelo, who was the guy from Liverpool, Curtis Jones, all of these names. And it's ultimately like, who's fabricating these lies, these links, because nothing ever comes of it. It feels like a joke. It feels like a Black Mirror episode. Every mercato, we're sitting here like, oh, are we going to get Ederson? Are we going to get Lookman? Are we going to get Diaby? Are we going to get Bremer? And ultimately, what we end up with is Andy Doof and fucking Darmian. Like, it's so frustrating to be an Inter fan right now because we've gone to two Champions Leagues in the past 3 years with players that honestly, there needs to be like a documentary on how these players have somehow made those runs, because it's honestly unbelievable with the lack of ambition that management has given to Inzaghi, Conte. Well, I don't want to say Conte. Conte got a lot, but under Inzaghi and under Kivu now, it's really unbelievable. And it makes me feel like what Oak Tree is doing is all this money we're winning, they're just paying off debts, trying to get that debt to zero, confirm that the new stadium is going to be built by 2031, and then the value of the club will never be higher. Boom, sell, smart business from Oaktree. But they don't realize the context that this Inter core has the ability to go on a Juve like dominant streak that Juve did in the mid 2000 teens. And they're inhibiting us from this happening. They really have robbed us fans and these players, it feels like, of going on a run like that of, 6 straight Scudetti in a row. And you could see that. There's no reason Milan should have won that Scudetto after we won our one under Conte. Napoli, maybe you could argue, they ran away with that one by 10 points. But then their next one last year, there's no reason Napoli should have won that Scudetto. They were absolutely terrible. So that's 5 Scudetti we should have in the span of 6 years that you can ultimately point at, in my opinion, management. And then you can maybe point at Inzaghi, some of his shortcomings. But as much as I want to, a lot of the times, Vince, put this on the players, and I don't know if you echo this as well, I don't think we could put anything against the players on their performances. It's a miracle they've done what they've done, given how this management has not backed the squad, really.
There are some cases where I do think we can blame the players, actually. I know it was last year, I forget when exactly in the season, but it was Mkhitaryan who came out in an interview and said after winning the Scudetto, they got this arrogance, this hubris that, oh, okay, it'll work out. We'll score eventually. It was just this. it's important to have self-belief, but there was this self-delusion, I think, that took over. And I think you can see that some of these players sometimes they think they're better than they are. You see the way Barella plays sometimes. He's arrogant, immature in a lot of cases. Clearly a great player, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 player who thinks he's a 10 out of 10 player. Um, and some of these other guys, you see it too. I'm not trying to single out one guy. That's just one example. And I feel like that, oh, everything is fine. We'll figure it out. We're that good without actually doing anything to make the result happen. Yeah, I feel like we can pin that on the players a little bit. The late game collapses, I think we can, the lapses in focus, yeah, I think that's partially on the players too. And I do think we can look at the coaching as well because, you know, past couple seasons, yeah, the one league that we won, we kind of ran away with it after Juventus collapsed in January and we went out of the Champions League a little early. The other seasons, Inzaghi, under Inzaghi, we had a bad tendency to throw away points that we shouldn't have. And to Kivu's credit, it seems like this year, these gimme points along the way that we would lose here or there under Inzaghi, it feels like Kivu's picking those back up. Now, the flip side is Kivu is still looking for a win against Juventus, Milan, Napoli. And there's two big chances for that coming up. You know, we've got this Juventus game in about 2 weeks. And another month after that, we have the next Milan Derby. Those are two must-win games. He's got to get them. At the very least, a draw would be disappointing, but acceptable considering the state of the table. But these games, we got to have them. And I feel like if we can do that, that will be a testament to maybe how Kivu is better able to adapt than Inzaghi. Because I feel like with Inzaghi, and even Zelensky mentioned it the other day, he kind of alluded, oh yeah, he had his favorites. You know, Inzaghi would stick the same guys out there every time if he could, the same 11 guys if he could. But Kivu, you can see there's a lot more trust in who he has on the bench, or maybe not with Pep Martinez, but as far as the forwards at least, and to an extent in the midfield, yeah, you see there's a lot more trust. He's willing to put guys like Sucic out there. He's willing to put guys like Pio Esposito and Angie Mbani out there, give them their chance, as opposed to running Lautaro and Thuram into the ground because Arnautovic, Taremi, and Correa can't screw in a light bulb between the three of them. Seriously, what does it say that like the four guys we have this year are already contributing more than the five guys we had last year? Correa is like a -1 dude.
Yeah, seriously. To go back to your point though about the late game collapses and the late season collapses and putting that on the players, I think you could also argue though that put that on management too. Like I said, if they bring in a player, and I'm just using Perisic as an example because he's the most recent one we've been linked with, but if you bring in a Perisic like player who's a champion, who has that mentality, that win at all costs, die mentality, before you lose, that I'll die before I give you 3 points mentality, that spurs on a team for the rest of the season. And if you have a player like that you can bring off the bench in late game situations, that also is a joker in your back pocket you could throw, kind of thing. And really, if you look, it's been since maybe Christian Eriksen under Conte that we've had a January signing that has come in and lifted the squad like that. And ultimately, we went on to win the Scudetto. Like, that's the type of players, and that's what you have to do in January. This isn't, I don't know. This isn't a time, the U23 team signing. I see more here we goes for the U23 squad, and it ultimately just pisses me off. I don't want to see another welcome to Inter, and it's a freaking U23 signing. I'm over that squad, even though I think it's good. It pisses me off that they get players every window, seemingly, and the senior squad is just stuck with Mkhitaryan and freaking Acerbi. It's really annoying me now, this management.
But
Oh,
I think it's
I
necessary too because I know, how many years have we said or have we complained about how other teams like Barcelona, so many kids come up through their program and then end up on the main roster, and it feels like they develop their youth, their talent correctly. Whereas it feels like how many times over the years have we said, oh, yeah, we had this guy in our, when he was young, or he was in our program, or He played with us a couple years and then he went somewhere else and got a lot better. At the end of the day, I think a properly run squad is going to need to learn how to develop talent internally. And I feel like that's the goal with the under 23 team here. Spend some cheap dollars, euros, to get some talent in the door, use them as a pipeline, use it as a pipeline to get them ready for the big time. Maybe we can loan them out if we need to. I mean, we need more stories like Pio Esposito. And, you know, it would be nice to get some big signings along the way too. I know growing up we were very fortunate that Moratti was able to splash as much cash as he did, but I do feel like considering how much debt we have and considering how other squads are run and how squads become competitive, I do think banking on the under 23 talent and developing those guys is a really good idea. Like I said, we've got guys like Topolovic and Barenbrook who look really good. And are they ready yet? I can't say I've watched them enough to really know for sure, but you hear enough noise that considering the upcoming holes we're going to have in our midfield, you got to start thinking about it.
Yeah, true. Good point. I would like to see us start integrating more youth and stuff like that. It's so frustrating, like I said, with this core that we have. And it you could put it I'm heated right now because I want to put all the blame on the management. You're right, a lot of the blame could be on the players, but it's annoying because like I texted the other day to our group message, the Bulls, when they won three back-to-back championships, Michael Jordan stepped away, comes back. They seemingly had the same squad, but what did they do? They went out and got Dennis Rodman, Tony Kukoc, because they knew that making those signings, adding more quality was going to ultimately propel them to even more championships. And they won three more. And we see this management after each Scudetto, Conte leaves and Hakimi leaves, Lukaku leaves. And then the last Scudetto, we haven't added anything really of note since then. Maybe Zielinski, you can finally add to that. But other than that, like, it's just frustrating because we have this squad, the best squad in Serie A, and we just come up short. And I think ultimately it's a lack of just smart investment for management that has led to a lot of our shortcomings. Oh,
I do think
I think
Akanji
it's
was a pretty good pickup in a pinch, though.
true.
That,
That's a good point.
yeah,
Yeah, good shout on that one. I think we can leave it at here now, though. I think I'm going to get even more heated, and maybe my face will start turning redder than it already is if we keep talking about this. But that's going to wrap it up for us, guys. We appreciate all the support. We'll be back on next week after the Sassuolo match, hopefully coming off the back of two wins like we were this week. Vince, do you want to add anything before we leave?
that'll do it for me. Thanks for having me on again, man.
Yeah, sweet. Guys, please make sure you like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. And as always, Forza Inter.